My name is Ruben Steven. I'm a sophomore at MIT studying Mechie and Comp Sci, and today I'm here with
Mistura Sesay, and I'm studying electronic and computer engineering at Loughborough University.
Real. And so yeah, I guess like because I know we wanted to talk about a bit about like the I guess like lived experience of being in that university and like how it is managing
Mhm.
as a person of color. But like before we get into that part, like I'm really just interested in like your story. Like how did you end up at that university and with that major in particular? Like what motivated you to pursue that?
So, like, when I was younger, I always kind of said, "Oh, yeah, I'd just be a doctor. I'd be a doctor," because my parents would always yeah, like you have to be a doctor, right? And I just never really thought about it. I was like, okay, I'll be a doctor. Then when I
Mhm,
was in secondary school, so that's like high school for you, like it's about middle school, high school.
mhm.
I kind of started like really liking computers. And like the thing is with me, like I'm an introvert and I really don't like talking to people. And I was like, what is the one thing that's like that's gonna minimize my interaction with people the most? And I was like, computers. And then I got like really into computers. And then I was like, oh, like I might do computer science as a joke for sixth form. And then in my sixth form, I did the IB. So that meant that I had to do
Mm.
six subjects, a language, like two languages, maths, and a science and a humanities. And then I kind of like fell in love with computer science from then on. And I was like this is actually something I really want to do, other than me just being like, yeah, like spin the wheel, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like when I started doing more of computer science, I was like, I went to summer school at this university called Surrey,
Mhm.
and I did an engineering summer school, right? And then I was like, I am too restless to be able to do just computer science, because computer science is so like, do you get what I mean? Like it's so,
Yeah, like
yeah,
deterministic and straight. Like follow this like set of like parameters. Like do this algorithm, bro.
exactly. Like, and I was just like, I actually don't like that. Like, I like the hands-on stuff. And like, I've always been building stuff, like ever since I was like 12, 14. Like
Mm.
I had this like hyper fixation on headphones. So like I learned like literally during the lockdown back in
Mhm.
2020, I built my own headphones. And then that's when I was like,
So
okay,
cool.
like thank you. I was like, okay, so like engineering is definitely what I kind of want to do, but like I like computers. And then I found out about my course.
Mhm.
And now, like now that I do my course, like I love it because I get to do maths, I get to do physics, I get to do chemistry, and I get to do engineering, software engineering, which is like
Mhm.
enough for me to be like, yeah, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. But like I love like what I love the most is just the pursuit of knowledge. Like if there was a polymath degree, I would do it. But like the whole point of degree is like specialization and like polymath, do you get what I mean? But I'm
Yeah.
kind of fine with where I am right now with like the engineering.
Mm. That's really interesting. Like I think I had a similar motivation for why I chose like mechanical engineering out of the other disciplines because it's that same sort of like it lets me do what it lets me access the widest range of different fields because like I could be a mechanical engineer working on like aviation or environmental science or automation like whichever like and I'm like honestly to that point of like specialization versus generalization there I feel kind of like oh I'm being irresponsible or like indecisive but I'm fine with it. I enjoy
Yeah.
like oh and then I also wanted to ask is like yeah like a bit about like about your ethnic background because that like I because I'm like personally my ethnic background is Haitian and so like
Mhm.
I think it's lucky like the immigrant parent starter book of like okay lawyer doctor engineer pick one of those probably lawyer not probably doctor because that's like oh my son's a doctor
The
my son
doctor, yeah. Like they're always like, my son's a doctor, my daughter's a doctor. Like,
yeah.
like
But yeah where are your peoples originally from.
so it's actually really confusing. So I just say my dad is Nigerian and my mum is Sierra Leonean, and
Hmm.
we are first gen, and I was born in Germany, and then we moved over
Hmm.
to London when I was like quite young.
Okay. Do you remember Germany at all?
No, not really. But
Okay.
like I went every like 2 or 3 years.
You like go back to visit?
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I guess because my next question is just like, what's that like? And then it probably is gonna feed into like that. Like, what is it
Mm.
like? Typically, like, a Black person in the UK/Europe in general? Like, what's that experience like?
I feel like I feel like when it comes to I know like with America specifically, the racism is much more like explicit, it's very overt. But
Hmm.
here it's so covert. It's so overtly covert. Like I think that a lot of, especially when it comes to people that aren't like POC, they tend to be like, well, the UK is not racist, the UK is not racist, but the UK is made like their racism is like covered up with microaggressions, politeness. There's like a culture of politeness here. And on top of that, everything is just, it just feels like there's a lot of dog whistles that we don't talk about. Do you get what I mean?
I think so. I don't want to like generalize to a country I've never been in, but I
Yeah.
would. It sounds like because you said like overtly covert. I would assume it's like, especially with like things of like I don't know, like institutionalized racism. It's hard to like pinpoint like, yeah, the way y'all
Yeah.
have that set up is just like if you're weird to me. But it sounds
Mhm.
like something along those lines.
Yeah, literally. They're just like, even though you wouldn't be aware of it, it's something that you listen to and you're like, wait, that's not, like
Mm.
they'll be like, for example, like your type of people. That's not necessarily saying you,
Yeah.
but it's what do you mean by my type of people?
Like,
Yeah.
okay. This is the question in particular is like you have an experience where it's like you because like, I'm thinking of like one of the like incidents of me as a kid, like when I first realized or like had it made apparent to me that like I was other, like, oh yeah, you're Black. And it's like it was, I think, I don't know, it wasn't like one of the first ones that come to my mind is like anytime we talked about like Black History Month would come up, it's February, Martin Luther King, da 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 da, all the heads
I
would
was
turn.
like to stare at you. Yeah.
So I guess like, but then like more like I guess like a stronger version of that is I remember I was in preschool. I was like building a house of cards or whatever. Or like, no, it was they were playing house. And I remember like I was specifically like, no, you can't play, you can't come because you're I'm like, "Damn."
Oh.
And so, yeah.
Oh.
So I was basically like, I wanted to ask like, were there any like sort of overt situations like that? And if not, like when did you first come up against like that realization that you might feel other from like the outside society?
So I kind of went to like my primary school was more so, it wasn't, I feel like it was much of a mix. So I never really realized, and all of my friends were like massively a mix. And then when I came to secondary school, there
Hmm.
weren't that many Black people, but already like the school I went to, it was quite, it was a majority white school.
Hmm.
And in my year, we were like set up in sets. There were like four sets. There was top set, there was like B set, C set, and D set. And with that, a lot of the Black people went in the A sets. So like I would be the only Black person in most of my classes. And essentially most of my friends became Asian people rather than Black people. But like with that, you hear a lot of things directed towards you in the classroom specifically, especially when you're around. No
Mm.
one else looks like you, mind you. It doesn't even matter if like other people look like you in the school. In that classroom, when it's just you, other
Mm.
people that don't look like you, and a teacher that doesn't look like you, it feels like everything, not all the time, but kind of made me come up with this like culture of awareness where it was like I had to be aware of how loud I was being. I had to
Mm.
be aware of like what I was doing, that I wasn't messing around, that I was always on task. Because if I wasn't on task, it would be like the Black person's not doing their work.
Yeah, like look, we knew. Oh my God, dog.
Like, yeah, like if I was to disrupt or anything, it would be like, of course you're being disruptive, of course you're being loud. Yeah. No, like honestly though, that is something that it wasn't even like an implied thing. A lot of the time, that's why like I used to be a very chatty person, but then
Mhm.
as the more I am in my school education, I actually realized that I just started talking less and less and less and less, especially because of that experience.
Mm. Yeah, and that's crazy. It's like the same sort of like different, like totally different countries, but very similar experience. And I think it's just like experience of if you're like a top performing Black person in general, it's probably like once you get like you mentioned, like you called it like ASETs. I think like the equivalent in America is like those advanced or like AP or like IB programs. Like the demographics of those are usually like white and Asians if we're keeping it a being. And yeah, and then okay, another like I guess like looking for more parallels. Since you mentioned like that same sort of thing of like okay, I'm one of the few Black people in these sorts of advanced classes, but the majority of the rest of the Black population are in those other classes. I remember high school. It was I don't know. I think I stopped caring a little bit more. But I remember middle school in particular. I used to get like not bullied, but like oh, like even like the experience of like too Black for the white kids, too white for the Black. Of like, oh, you think you're bougie or whatever. I'm like, bro, I'm just doing that.
Yeah, like honestly. Yeah. I feel like that part, especially when you're into, not even just that, when you're into what you're into, they're just like, oh, you're so white. Like expect like your choice, like especially when it comes to being in STEM, it's like it's labeled as whiteness. It's not just you having an interest.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing that just came to my mind is how like I take a little bit of an issue with that aspect of Black culture of like it's somewhat of a crab in a barrel type reaction where it's like why can't things of intellectual like capacity be associated with Blackness? Like why did that have to like oh you talk proper, you talk white? Like no, I know white people who can't talk as well as me or you do. It's like it's not because they're white. It's just like this is I forget. Like I remember I talked to a professor at MIT and he had said something similar of like I don't talk white. I talk like a man with 3 Ivy League degrees, and I'm like that part, my boy. And so like to a degree, I and like I especially coming here, I see that other argument of like okay, I'm looking touching on 2 different topics. The question I wanted to ask is like is there that same sort of like what is I guess Black British culture is my like overarching question. And then something else I was talking like I started touching upon like because that's like what came to my mind is that like self-regulation amongst the Black people in these sort of like higher echelon spaces. Like once you get here, like I've come in, like being at MIT, I've come in contact with people who like again not directly overtly, but it's like the implicit attitude is put that away. You're making us look bad. So that's like oh you're making us look disruptive. You're making us look ignorant, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like I'm just being myself, bro. And so the question is, yeah, what like yeah, that's such a broad question, and I'm sorry because to like it's gonna be hard to like parse. But like, what I guess would you say characterizes Black British culture, if at all?
I feel like with Black British culture, especially, it's a lot about what you show on the outside and like your mentality as well on the inside. So we have this thing, this saying, like bust down bandits. Like you need to have you need to have your like hair done. Like for me, I've like my sister used to wear like wigs a lot and she'd be like, Mistura, not wearing a wig. And I was like, okay. And like therefore I never got the opportunity to like start wearing them. But so essentially I'd always get like and I know a lot of like other Black women feel the same too. Do they feel like obligated to have to wear like their lashes done, have to like have their wig, or like you can't like even have your hair like how I have it like in corners. Like you need to have a hairstyle on all the time. You need to always have your edges done. You need to always be like it's so exhausting. The list is so exhaustive, and I could go through it. But like essentially, it's all about like outside presentation. Anything to do with that kind of like deviates from that, like alternative of ways of like dressing, being part of the LGBT, being neurodivergent, anything part like past that, like it's a no-go. You can't have a sense of identity. You have to be this like it like goes under the presumption that you have to be part of a monolith. You have to look this way and be that way. Especially with like the males too. I think it's the same way with like the way they dress, with like their hairstyles, and then it becomes to the way you interact with other Black people too. Because then it's less so about like the way you're acting outside on this, like in front of other people, but it's also about the way you interact with other Black people. If some Black people know that you don't really like, you're quite awkward, you don't really talk that much, you're quite like to yourself a lot, they tend to have some sort of, I wouldn't say aversion, but it's kind of like an us versus them. I mean,
Mm.
like it, I feel like people tend to group away from you a bit more. I feel like with a lot of like Black people, we tend to like herd. And then when someone's been being ostracized, no one's gonna like be like, oh, like, are you okay? Everyone's just gonna go and
And branch out and like, oh, I'm gonna be like friends with the kid who's being ostracized. Like, nah.
yeah, literally.
Dang. Yeah, man. Huh. I think similar things. I don't know. I'm not, like, I don't think I'm like well versed enough on the respective cultures to make this like statement definitively. But just like interesting. Yeah, an interesting thing I was like picking up on is that it seems as though like the British culture is a bit more collectivized and like because you mentioned like they don't necessarily like they try to stifle some of that individuality. And I feel like conformity is a byproduct that happens in any sort of like social gathering, but okay, because I can say like the question I was gonna ask is like, oh, is it more so like, do you feel as though it's more prevalent in British culture than American culture? But that might be a hard question to like ask if you don't have exposure to both.
Yeah. I'm not really sure about American Black culture. Like I've only really been to America a couple of times, but like I'm not really sure about their culture. I don't know. I feel like in America it's more like acceptable to kind of be yourself rather
Mhm.
than like if you come in the UK, you've seen a lot of the things you'll see. Like if you go on TikTok and you see like you just type something about the UK or something like that, people will be like, "Oh yeah, the UK is bad vibes. The UK doesn't like individuality." Like a massive thing is like if you literally go on TikTok and search "UK is bad vibes," like there will be thousands and thousands of videos talking about it because it doesn't really feel like whenever like you haven't even when it comes to like music, not even just like us as people,
Mhm.
when you have an artist that's trying to do something different, that's trying to make a difference, people are gonna clown them and they will clown you to like the moon and back, like they won't stop. And the thing is like the UK is very, very small
Mhm.
compared to the US. And especially London. London is very small. So like when you meet people that are from London, especially when you're in the quotation marks creative scene, or like, when you're like when you have friends, you actually start to realize like when you meet anybody on the street now, like if you talk to anyone, meet anyone at any motive, you actually just be like, why do you have so many mutuals as me? And I feel like, yeah, like I feel like that kind of enforces the whole like Big Brother is watching thing.
Mm.
Because like when I was reading, there's this book that I read called 1984 by George Orwell. And
Yeah.
essentially, it's like when I was reading, I was like, this is just UK culture though. Like, honestly, it feels like Big Brother is just watching. Honestly, there's someone just watching, whether it's like your friends, your friend's cousin, or like everyone's always watching you. I feel like that's why people feel more pressured to like stay in the box and not have a sense of individuality because they feel like if they get mocked, they can't run away from it.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. Okay. A follow up question to that. How I think you called them A levels. I'm my bad. Or sixth form. I think you said sixth form.
Big film, yeah.
So how big was your graduating class?
I think it was about 138 people.
Oof. Okay. So yeah, like if there's gossip, bro, everybody knows is what it sounds.
Everybody knows.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. And then I guess yeah, this is a bit more like psychological. Like you mentioned, like there was a shift in terms of like from being more outgoing or like outspoken to being more like reserved or like introverted. Currently, like what is your I guess like evaluation on that? Like which is that something that you like would you like do you see it as like, oh, I would want to get back to being a more outgoing type of personality, or do you feel like pretty content with your, I guess, level of like extroversion?
Well, I feel like currently I want to work more on my extroversion, but I feel like right now I kind of do things that help. Like I have my hobbies outside, my like extracurriculars outside of uni that make me interact with other people that don't really need me to be chatty in class because I'm not chatty. Especially like in the lecture room. Like I feel like a lot of people have like said to me, the people that I've met outside have been like, oh, like, you know, like I thought you didn't like me because you just don't talk. And I was just like,
Oh, my bad.
sorry. I'm just not like a talker because if I speak, like
Mm,
I'm quite I'm really, really, really bad at small talk. So I
mm,
just either not speak or I speak a lot. So I tend to balance out my energy by just not talking most of the
gotcha.
time.
I guess, and then you'd mentioned like you have like other outlets where you'll be interacting with people and like
Mhm.
hobbies like that. Like I guess like what, yeah, what do those consist of?
So I do theatre at my university.
So
And
cool.
thank you. And that like that's kind of fun because you just get to not be yourself.
Mm.
And outside of that I do skateboarding. That just kind of you just I kind of only feel free when I skate, to be honest. Like
Mm.
mm,
How did you
I
end up that?
so back in 2021, I think I started, me and my friend were just like, oh, like, well, actually, at first it was her idea. She was like, yeah, like, let's skate, let's skate. And I was like, no, like, I'm gonna get hurt. That's so scary. And she's like, no, 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 let's skate, let's skate. And we were meant to skate with two other friends. And then we
Mm.
just ended up that entire summer. All I did was like use my skateboard to just go to places and like I don't know how to ride a bike. So that's just my main mode of transport when I'm back in my hometown. But right now, when I'm in Loughborough, like I skate occasionally, but I do want to get a bit more into that this year.
Mm. I guess like what's the yeah, what's the like is it like the like yeah, what is the reason that you don't skate as much in Locker? Like is it the like part of it obviously is like okay, I got schoolwork to do. I don't have this much time. But I guess like is the terrain the same? Like what is and then also at least like another question of like how do you like your school in general?
Okay. So the terrain is more like rocky,
Okay.
first of all. So like that kind of like puts me off. And I haven't like figured out a route. I only recently figured out a somewhat route, but my university's on a hill. And it's
Uh,
not like Abbeywood, like where I live, everywhere's just flat. So
okay.
like you're kind of able to just skate everywhere. But here it's like if I was gonna go to school, I can't think of a way where I wouldn't have to get off my board.
Okay.
So I don't think it would be efficient. But there are ways that I can go, but I can't be bothered. Yeah, I can't be bothered. And sorry, what's the other question?
It was just like in general, like what is your experience of like the environment there? Like do you okay, and then I guess like I'll go first to like I guess like give an example of the things I'm thinking about. I don't Boston is cool at
Mm-hmm.
times, but I'm from South Florida, and so it's like ridiculous. Like I'm from like right now it's like 70 degrees where I'm from, and then I'm
Mm-hmm.
here and it's like 20, and then it's also like it gets dark at like 4 p.m. and so I'm like I really like I'm here and it's like my mood drops significantly and I'm low key depressed because I'm like damn Boston like you're sucking the energy out of me, bro. But like obviously grateful, like, oh my god, yeah, go to the, like really cool institution. They got really cool opportunities, but I'm like, oh man, my lived experience is not necessarily the most like joyous at all times.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of like that. I mean, that's kind of like that in the entirety of the UK. That's why everybody's so like depressed here because it's always dark. No, it's actually just always dark. Like that's why everyone's always like in a mood and stuff. But I
Mm,
feel like here, Loughborough compared to London, because I live in London.
mhm.
The difference is insane. Like I can go on a late night walk at like 4 a.m. here, and like
Oh,
I'd be fine. But London, not
mm.
even at 1 or
Dang.
12. Yeah. No.
Hmm. Is it like a college town? Like, I guess, like, what's the surrounding area like?
It's kind of like in the middle of nowhere. And
Oh,
yeah, like 1/3 of the population here is just students.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. I guess, yeah. What's your thoughts on that? I guess, like, is that something that, like, oh yeah, I'd rather go to a school with more people, or is it like this kind of better since you're more like introverted? Like, honestly, I wouldn't want the people around.
Yeah, no, I love it here. Honestly, like I like this place is just quiet. Like even when there's students here, I feel like it's just so quiet. It's
Mm,
just chill. Like there's not really much to do, I guess. Not it's just that everybody is quite like everyone's quite manufactured. Like they're all kind of like the same person. It's very hard to find a person that like the people that are alternative are there, but it's a very small lot. And if you want to go looking for them, you either go to a skate park or yeah, no, genuinely. I think that's the only way you could find them.
got you. So interesting that like the word manufactured stood out to me. I guess like when you say manufactured, like what do you think of when you say that, or like what does manufactured in what fashion?
So I don't know if you know this, but Loughborough is like a sports uni.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's like it's quite like do you know Duke? You know,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like Duke, but it's not at the same time. Like it's like the Duke of the UK, but it's like the Duke of the world, kind of like everybody here just like if I was to go outside right now, it's 6 o'clock. If I was
Mm.
to go outside right now, there'd be someone running. If I was about to go outside at 1 a.m., there would be someone running. Genuinely, all they ever do, like when I came here, my first and only thought was like, oh, all these people ever do is just run. And yeah, like that's all it really is though. Like just very the average person you'll meet in Loughborough, like they'll drink occasionally, like if it's like the sports night. But other than that, like they're quite like direct with what they do. Like they study what they study, and then they're like they have like their regime of like they go to the gym this amount of times in the day. They study for this amount of hours, and I feel like everybody's quite like by the book like
Okay.
that. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I was gonna say like I think I feel somewhat of like similar, I don't know, tension or like chafing towards like the MIT community because like it's not necessarily like the sporty type, but it's like that like if it like manufactured if it especially okay. Let me preface this with the fact that I am very grateful that I go here. It's very cool. However, like as a result of the filtering process, like okay, we're looking like the school filters for like very academically exceptional like STEM sort of people.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I've seen, as a result, you lose a bit of personality
Mm-hmm.
because you were hyper fixating on math. You probably didn't get as much socialization, and so like your primary like not everybody obviously like you mentioned like there's you can find them at the different like spaces if you look hard enough, but it feels like the overall culture is like very grindy and like I'm gonna come here, I'm gonna study not I'm again I don't want to like characterize everybody's I'm like come here, study my math, do this, get my software engineering job, and then that's it. I'll be fine working like 80-hour weeks or whatever. And it's like I personally just don't relate. Like my overall objectives are I guess like uh, grander is not the right word because there are people here who are going to do like crazy like impressive things, but it's just I don't know if I want to lean that far into the technical aspect because I feel like it loses a bit of like flavor and like vitality to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I guess another question is like two things because okay, you mentioned like the interest in theater, so I was somewhat interested in how you ended up getting into that.
Oh, okay. So essentially one day my friend, she was kind of stressing out about a play. She's like, oh, I need to do this person's makeup and this person's makeup. And I was like, oh, I'll just come with you. I wasn't doing anything. Then like I started like watching the play when they were doing it, and I was like, wait, this is actually really good. And we just like I had so much fun just doing the makeup, and then we ended up winning the best makeup of the year for that play. So like I was like, oh,
So
I could do
cool.
this again. Like, and then literally this last semester I just finished. Like, I just did my first play. I'd
Mm,
acted for the first time, and yeah, that's kind of how I got into theatre. And I've
I
just
guess
really loved it ever since.
real. I was gonna say like, how was the experience of like doing your first play? Like, I guess like take me through like the. I'm assuming it was like pretty like nerve wracking or like anxiety inducing, and like how did you manage that? And like how do you feel now that it's like that you gotten through it?
So like the first time I was acting, the first time I did an acting performance was when I had my audition.
Mm.
And in the audition I was like, I was on my way there and I was like, I'm not gonna do the sample piece for the lead role because no, no, like I couldn't. And then literally I think I don't actually know if any of my friends were there. So I ended up having to do it in a group, and then they were like, yeah, just you have to be Abigail. And I was like, oh,
So I get.
okay. And then for the second bit, it was like a very like emotional one. And I was like, oh, this is so embarrassing. It's gonna be in front of 40 people I don't know. And then I was just like to myself, wait, it's actually just not me. If it's not me doing it, then why am I embarrassed? If I was embarrassed, I wouldn't be embarrassed. Why would I be embarrassed if it's not me doing it? And then I
Mm.
got a call back for that role, but I didn't get the role. I'm like fine with that though. But like I was quite happy that I didn't get the role because I don't want to learn that many lines for my first time. I know I would forget. I even forgot some of my lines on in my first performance, but
Mm.
everyone just like moved along. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh, it's fun though when you finally do it, but at the time I was so in my head about it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Something else that like that just reminded me of is you had mentioned a bit earlier about like the I think you had used a different word, but the word that came to my mind was escapism. And it's like
Mm.
to that same thing of like, oh, this is me, but it's like this isn't me though. And
Hmm.
so I guess like hmm, I'm about to go on a mean tangent, but basically because like that same okay, I think of the theme escapism, and then I think the way that it had manifested for me in a lot of ways was in my infatuation with fiction. And so
Hmm.
like I loved Harry Potter. I love Percy Jackson, and I think that was like that same way of like it's me because I'm reading it, but like for today or like this couple of hours, I'm in Hogwarts, bro. And so I guess
Hmm.
the question I wanted to ask is like, do you have any like favorite pieces of fiction and or like favorite pieces of art in general? Like whether it's like plays, because that's like it seems like that's one of your mediums of choice, or
Hmm.
like yeah, it's like yeah, what is your taste like in terms of those types of like stories?
So at first it was kind of like my first like means of when it came to like means of escapism, the first things I did was just study. And then when I
Mm,
came to uni and I gained more of a sense of self, I started when I started theatre, I really like this play called A View from the Bridge that I studied
mm,
back in sixth form. And that and A Streetcar Named Desire, those are like plays that I really like.
yeah. Cool.
Have you read that play?
I read Streetcar Named Desire. That's the one where it's like, like in the 1950s abusive relationship type. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
bro. You just unlocked the memory. That's so cool.
Yeah, I love that play. Like it's very or like it's or like even this Haruki Murakami book called it's like a collection of short stories. And there's this one story that I really like called The Second Bakery Attack. I like that one too. And then the other way I kind of started escaping is also through like this sounds weird, but through philosophy. Like
Mm,
reading philosophy kind of like I feel like it helps you just like zoom out a
yeah.
little bit more. And it's quite grounding at the same time though, but it just kind of helps you like zoom out a lot more. Like I've read a couple of Dostoevsky's work.
Mm,
um yeah, I really like just my favorite feeling about philosophy is just like logic and like, you know, fallacies and stuff like that. I had this book in sixth form called like the Book of Paradoxes from A to Z. That was like, I don't know, I just really like philosophy when it comes to stuff like that. Like, it's just so like when you're able to just sit and think, but like through the lens of something else, but on like in a wider scale, it's much more nicer and like quite relieving of like your existentialism.
Yeah, I think a phrase that you mentioned that I really like is that zooming out, because I feel like high key what philosophy feels like to me is like it's like not highest. Okay, this also opens, I guess, like a segue to like different, like basically like another branch in the conversation, but because like I feel like philosophy intertwines a lot with like faith a little bit, and like basically like beliefs in terms of like, okay, there's the lowest levels of abstraction. You could have like tactics, then you go up as like strategy, and then you have like mindsets, and then you have like philosophies of like, okay, this is how. And like it seems as though philosophy, this is like my, I guess, like rudimentary definition, like what it feels like in my head is like this is the level of abstraction at which you like basically you set the governing principles for the rest of your thoughts. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I like operate, like, yeah, it's like that same sort of thing of like, it's escapism, I guess. It's escapism, but you're very much present at the same time. And so it's like a really, really cool, like, intertwining of those two different like levels at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I just feel like also when you kind of look at things in that type of lens too, it kind of like makes you realize that a lot of your problems just don't really matter. Like, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do anything about them, but like you shouldn't also, like, I'm a type of person where like I can't sit down for 5 minutes without my head just like having
Going,
50
yeah.
billion things going on at the same time. But when I'm able to just look at from the perspective of me, like a fly, like if I was like observing my life as a fly on the wall, it doesn't really mean anything at the end of the day. Like has so much meaning in the fact that it doesn't mean anything, I think.
Your life, when you say it doesn't mean anything, are you referring to your life or the thoughts that you're having like during those times?
Oh, the thoughts. Yeah,
the thoughts. I'm like, I don't know. I think it like means something to me.
No, it's definitely the thoughts.
Okay, interesting. Two questions. One is like, okay, one's tactics and then one's like higher order of philosophy. But basically, because like that same sort of like observing yourself, like basically like, yeah, like putting yourself in the seat of the observer as opposed to the subject, like the observer as opposed to the subject or object. And so one is like, do you, yeah, like I guess like, do you have a mindfulness or like meditation practice? And then a second one is like, yeah, I guess like A/B combo is like, if you were to describe like, not necessarily like, oh, I am a stoic, I am like a hedonist, but basically it's like, do you have, I guess, different like schools of thought or philosophies that you feel like your thoughts are like
Aligned.
Worldview aligned with?
Yeah, so with the mindfulness thing, I journal. I don't necessarily always use a book, right? But what I like to do is like I like to talk.
Yeah.
I like to talk. So like I'll go into a park and I'll go when I'm on my walk, like I go on a specific walk. And on my route there's a specific bench I have to sit at. And then like I get my phone out and then I'm like,
okay, Eckhart Tolle. Not the bench.
I'd like get on my phone, I'm like, yeah, so I'm just thinking. I would like sit in silence until like a thought comes to my head, and I'm like, oh, wait, this is like philosophical breakthrough. Hold on, like, and I'll just get people like some of my friends will just like have issues, and then that would just come to my mind. Like recently, my friend had an issue, and she was looking for a problem to not a problem, a solution to her problem, and then I was like, sometimes you can't really look for what you need to do, but you need to look for what you shouldn't be doing, because that might give you the answer for what you should do. And then I was like, wait.
So why did I just cook there?
Yeah, so like I just like sitting down and like just talking. And it kind of helps me, like by the time I'm done with my walk and I'm like, I don't look back on the videos, but like by the time I look, like maybe like in like a couple of months I'll look back on it, but I'll come back and I'll just have a much more like clearer mindset, and like my brain will be less foggy, because then I feel like when I resolve things vocally, I I register it subconsciously, so then I'm like more calm and I can just get on with my day.
Yeah.
And with my sorry, school of thoughts you asked,
Mhm.
um I'd say I'm quite an I'd say an, I used to be much of a nihilist existential, but I feel like I'm more of an existential nihilist nowadays.
Hmm. What do you like? What does that distinction mean for you?
So um before it was with me being the nihilist existential, it was kind of like, oh, this is it was kind of like more of the, oh, this is being governed by a like a bigger being, and that doesn't have a meaning. But now I'm more like, this has a meaning. This has this has no meaning, but like it doesn't matter because you can just give yourself the meaning anyways.
Yeah. Huh. Ah. Okay. If I had a better memory, I'd be able to like repeat or like craft this better. But there's like a YouTube video I watched. I forget exactly when. I think it might have been by like Pursuit of Wonder. But I
Yeah.
think that same sort of like thought train is like Nietzsche and or Franz Kafka, and whichever one of them wrote A Man's Search for Meaning, because like I think that's like the core question of that, of like, oh, a man's search for meaning. I believe it's like him going through the like Russian Soviet Union like torture camps, or the, what do you call those, like the gulag. Yeah, he was like going through the gulags,
Like,
and
yeah.
in those most like trying times, like he started off by being like, this is just trash, like you mentioned, like there's no meaning here, nothing cares about me, this is just terrible. And then I think like The Man's Search for Meaning is like, I think it detailed that same sort of shift, and I think that's really cool.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, so what's your like school of thought then? Like, or anything that you kind of um relate to, if it's
I,
more than that.
mm, I think the primary things I find myself drawn to, they've ebbed and flowed a little bit, but like right now, like yeah, for this season, it's been stoicism and essentialism. It's like that same sort of
Mhm.
like, this isn't the end of the world type feeling, or like I think you mentioned like it doesn't like, there's still meaning to it, but like this specific thought, or like this specific, like you're mad about whatever you're mad about right now, it low key doesn't matter. This is fleeting and like like impermanent, and I think
Mhm.
that like stoicism has helped me a lot, especially when dealing with like the inconveniences or hardships that I've gone through in my life. Of like, okay, like that cow in the rain type thing of like, okay, I'm gonna be able to like weather and endure this, and keep track of the fact that there's something larger, or like there's something after. Like this is like seeing past the false end. I think that's probably like one of the best things I've gotten from stoicism. And then essentialism has like, it's mixed with, there's like a, I don't even know if like, I don't know which bucket of knowledge I would categorize this as, because it like fits a bunch of different places. Like it's called the 80-20 principle. It's also called the Pareto principle. It's also called the Matthew principle, if you want to see it from like a biblical perspective. But it's pretty much like 20% or less of inputs to any system are going to yield 80% or more of the results. And like I try to keep that in mind. So it's like, okay, the majority of the stuff I'm doing in pursuit of any given objective, I'm probably just wasting a bunch of energy. And so it's
Mhm.
like getting trying to, yeah, trying to be, because I'm not perfect, but it's like trying to get more like, yeah, cutting the fat basically. So it's like I think a perfect example of like me applying that, like how it's been like making itself manifest in the trajectory of my life, is how I ended up choosing engineering slash MIT. It was very much like, okay, the objective is like life changing wealth within the context of my family. And so that's like, okay, engineering salary. And then it was also like, what is the bare minimum that I need in order to get this? Because like, okay, I could go become a doctor because that's good money too, but it's like, that's a long time in school, bro. I don't need.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, I don't. So 20% of actions is getting a degree in a STEM field. Okay, cool. I don't need to go to the like, I don't need to complete the skill tree of like, okay, I don't need to become a full doctor, get my PhD or whatever. I just need my I just need not my master's. I just need my bachelor's, and then that's enough. Like that's the essential piece that would be necessary for me to get the objective I'm after, which is the 6-figure salary. And yeah, I think, and then in terms of like, I'm kind of backtracking, but to that like journaling piece, I guess this is more informed by the stoicism, I guess, but basically like that. I think you mentioned like, oh, going back after you've gotten like the brain fog out and being able to like, bro, having that like level of separation of like, dang, I was really, because I have them in like my iPhone voice memos, and so I have some from like sophomore year during COVID, and like I forget exactly what I was sad about. I might have been sad about some situationship or whatever it was, and I'm like in the phone time, I'm like, oh no man, like she likes me, she like if she wants, and then I come back and listen to it like a couple years later, I was like, bro, shut up. It is like
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's like a very beautiful like I love the fact that we have technology to this degree because it allows like the capture and like reflection upon very candid recordings.
Yeah. I feel like it's quite nice to just be able to have that foresight and not that foresight, but like that 2020 and just be like, yeah, what was I on about?
But like I love it. It's like because I remember I think there was a point, there still is, where it's like you look back and then like your initial reaction is to like, condemn yourself or just like go straight into self-operation. But what I've realized, or like a part, like I don't know, I guess like an additional piece to my way of thinking that I feel has been helpful to me is to realize / give yourself the grace of like the fact that you can see that you're being annoying or being immature or whatever is the direct, like that's the evidence that you've grown because you're able to see it. And I'm like, ooh, real, because like I like as because like even right now, like I'm 20 years old, right? Like I would like to think that I'm decently like put together, I guess, but it's like nah. Like I know for a fact, like however well together I think I might be, I'm gonna come back in 5 years and be like, bro, I'm an idiot, or like I.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that the other day. I'm not gonna lie, like I was really like, yeah, like okay, I feel like I've done enough growth now. Then 5 minutes later, I was like,
Nah.
I was just like, that's such a stupid thing to say. What the hell? No, but to be able to like, the way I think of it is like, if you're on a ladder, you like, and you look down, you can only like look down and then see how far you've come, and then that act of like disgust is also the same of looking down. That's why I think it's like you're looking down on the way you were before.
Yeah, man. Huh. No, it was like there was something on the tip of my thoughts and then I lost it. Ladder. Huh. I'll let it go. But yeah, I think another thing, like to that analogy of a ladder / stairs, this is heavy tangent, but it reminded me just because of like the act of like looking back, it only makes sense in hindsight. And so another, I guess like a pivotal piece of my maturity, I believe, was getting over that assumption or like implicit belief that I should be able to see forward or ahead of me. Where it's like I should like basically like giving yourself the grace of like, bro, you're gonna like the analogy, the reason why I like the ladder, like brought it back is because the analogy I like to use, or like I forget where, I think I got it from like a Jordan Peterson video or something like that. But it's like the analogy of a lamp versus a laser pointer. And so like life, if you want to like, I don't know, and you analogize it to like climbing some set of stairs. And so it's like you're like for majority of the time you're just going to barely be able to see to the step above you. And even then barely, like it's really like dark and fuzzy. And so I feel like there's a phase in my life where I was sitting stagnant and being like, no, I need to make sure I map out the entirety of these stairs before I even take the next step because I just can't deal with like uncertainty.
Yeah.
Like, I need to know it so bad. But then it's like, I've come to realize like, bro, you'll waste way more time sitting around waiting for an elevator than if you just go like stub your toe a little bit. You're gonna have to stub your toe to be able to climb, bro.
Exactly. Exactly. That is so true. I feel like also with like skateboarding too, like I'm a
Mm,
very anxious person, but I feel like ever since I started skateboarding, that kind of helps me with the anxiety because it's like you don't skate because other people are watching you skate because skating makes you feel free. And it
mm.
kind of like, makes you feel like you have wings and like I feel like that's quite therapeutic. So then you like learn to fall over and then you're just fine. Like the other week, like I dropped in and my knees like just were bleeding and like they were like in pain for the entire week. And I was like, damn, this sucks. But now that I'm thinking about it, like it doesn't hurt anymore. It
Mm.
doesn't matter. It's fine. And like now I know how to drop in, so
Mm.
it's fine.
Real. That's so it's so funny. I think I just like on my because right now I'm in like the student center of my campus or whatever, and
Mhm.
on my way here I like just recorded a video about that same sort of like you'll learn the thesis of the video was that you learn way more from like that stumbling or like taking imperfect action than trying to analyze or like come up with like trying to make your first step your perfect step or like trying to make
Mhm.
your first artwork whatever it is your magnum opus. Like nah, bro, it's gonna be trash and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. I guess, do you have any other, I guess, like things that, because, okay, it sounds like skating was one of the things that has been a bit liberating to like your mindset. Do you
Mhm.
have other activities that you engage in or like other events that you think like were monumental in shaping the way that you think?
Um, I just say like probably the journaling,
Mm,
definitely. Because the most you learn about yourself is like through journaling and like obviously speaking to other people and like gaining that learning life experience. Like one thing I like to do is like when I'm going on my walks, usually sometimes there's just like a person there that's like sitting on a bench or something. I just go up to them and just start speaking to them. I've like the more you interact with your environment, the more you learn about it.
mm,
And I've learned so many valuable, like one time, me and my friends were just sitting on a bench. Like this was in summer, we were just sitting on a bench. And then it was like one of those benches that had someone's name on it because they'd passed away. And I was like, I went on a long tangent, like a 30-minute long tangent about how like crazy it is um that your last time you die is like when someone says your name for the last time and stuff. And I was like, I was so like I was speaking about I was like, yeah, like it's so crazy. And they were like, yeah, no one's trying to hear that. And then literally like 5 to 10 minutes later, this lady walks by with her dog. And then she comes up to us and then she's like, oh, you're sitting on my dead husband's bench. And then she starts speaking to us about him. And then like we were like, she was like, oh, I don't want to bother you guys. I was like, no, 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 sit, sit. And like we spoke to her for like an hour, right? And like she was talking about it and she was like, oh yeah, like there was one thing she said that kind of stuck with me. She was like, oh, I hope I'm not bothering you, but I go home to Lonely House anyways. And then I was like, oh my God. So like literally that like it woke something in me. I was like talking to this woman for an hour.
yeah.
When she left, yeah, I just looked at all of my friends like,
I told you.
what did I say though? Like, yeah, that's like one of like the most profound life experiences that like I'll kind of keep with me. The timing of that was
Mm.
just yeah.
I'm trying to think like there's so like they'll like I think they need like more prompting I guess but like there's a couple of those I remember and like a lot of the times like okay so it feels weird giving this as a prescription but I would just say like to whoever watching I would definitely facilitate or I guess like co-sign the act of having more random conversations because you never know who's like you never know what wisdom or like knowledge you can gain from like the most random people. Like it could be some strung out because like for I'm thinking of like an example of that I've had. Just a random person like on the public transit. Like I'm talking to some like I would have like my first impression of them like my thin slice was like oh yeah they're strung out they're on drugs or something like that. But then like they
Mhm.
started philosophy, and then like it's this dude talking, bro, so much lore. Like he told me about like his like 3 children and how like one of them like has a pretty like they have a rough relationship or whatever, and it's just like getting that like insight into like you get to be in their shoes for at least for that the span of that conversation, and I feel like
Yeah,
those are like some of the most invaluable experiences that you get to have. Like that's like one of the best privileges of being a human. Of, like,
exactly. Yeah, and that's why I like say that like because those are so priceless. That's why I like don't believe that like I believe that experience is the currency because of that. Because like you get that experience and you just like I don't know, you just no, you get to be a fly on the wall. Yeah,
oh,
you kind of
bull.
like I kind of think I find quite of like solace knowing that like in someone else's life, I'm just an insignificant stranger that just walked past them on the
Yeah,
street.
what that like there's a name for that emotion. I think it's
I
like
think it's on
sonder.
the yeah.
Sonder, yes, bro, Sonder, bro. That's it's so like when you're driving, it's like dang, like that'll be like the most like mind f like whoa, like when you realize like oh yeah, everybody that I'm walking past on this street or like everybody that I'm driving past, like they're going to some home or like they have their own set of motivations that are just as real for them, just as pertinent that mine are to me, and it's like
Hmm.
there's 7, 8, I don't know how many, but like something billion of those, and it's like damn, that's a lot of complexity, bro.
Yeah, I love it.
Hmm. I don't know. And to a degree, it kind of makes me like I don't know if you've had a similar experience, but I remember there was a point, and it's like it's similar like in different areas, but basically like coming up against the bounds of your mortality, and it's like realizing like oh, I'm never going to be able to read all the books that exist. I'm never going to be able to meet all the people that are around. I'm never going to be able to do all the different activities that I might want to, and like like same thing with that sounder like I'll never get to fully like know what the entirety of their life or their story is like just because like I only get my like 90 years maybe.
Mhm. Yeah, I used to like I used to really get upset over that when I was younger. Then I was
Mm,
like I think I was like 13 or 14 and I came to the realization like they're doing that for me.
mm. What do you mean?
So like I will never be like I'm in my accommodation right now. I will never be able to like see all of the things some of the students next to me have seen, but they see it for me. I'm just part of like a wider network of humans that gets to explore this part of the like universe. I feel like it's just like humans are like the universe reflecting on itself,
Mm,
just looking. That's why I was like, oh, they just do it for themselves. I like that was probably one of the first part of like the formings of the way I think, just that we're all part of this massive network of humans and we're just looking in on the specific thing. Like you open your eyes and it's just a massive magnifying glass.
mm. That reminded me of two different 1.5 but yeah one of them is like I guess like other ways to yeah other ways that I've heard to describe that same sort of like that overall theme of connection and that yeah some you mentioned like humans are just the universe reflecting on itself.
Hmm.
I think that's really interesting. And I think another way I think I had heard that put is or like I guess like another theory, I guess. But it's like each different human or instance of person is like what yeah, I don't even know if I necessarily super duper subscribe to this, but I think it's a very interesting thought of like we're all just different like all of our lives are just like the meditations of some god on like the
Hmm.
different angles of its own being. And so it's like, yeah, you're just like one angle or like cross section of this overall like your I guess like your existence in your life is just one like I don't know.
Dimension of like the multi-dimensional being that's like God.
Yeah. And then the question like that came to my mind right there is like, what is my life on meditation on? I'm like, oh shit.
Mm.
Like that's a heavy one.
Yeah. Um, that's a very hmm. I feel like It's just like so essentially what I'd like to do, I think I've already started thinking about like PhDs, right? Because there's like a topic I really want to do and it's for maths and it's
Mhm,
for like um multi-dimensional surfaces,
mhm,
right? And like one thing I was like when I learned imaginary numbers, like calculus, I've always just had an affinity towards it. It's just always been my favorite part of maths, calculus, because I feel like calculus explains the universe quite. Like even when like say if like, I had a ball in my hand and I threw it, I would already my brain kind of is figuring out the calculus of where it's gonna land. It's like it knows the trajectory, and even like with things like the do you know what the Dirac delta function is, right?
That's where it's like it's infinity at one spot and then
One
zero.
point.
Mm,
Yeah, that can explain like you can find out the force for a specific point of like the ball, for example, because it's infinity in all, and then it's like infinitesimally small at one point. So
mm,
I feel like with that, I mean, the more I delve into my like degree, I know I'm gonna find out more about it, and that's like what I'm the most excited for. But
mm,
what I was like, one thing I started looking into, I started when I started doing imaginary numbers, I was like, wait, if you've got imaginary numbers and it's just like a 2D number line essentially,
mhm,
what we can do, why can't we just use that to like map four-dimensional surfaces with imaginary numbers? And then I kind of like got into that a bit more. I don't remember what the kind of maths it's called, but like I'd love to like research it. That's what I'm mostly interested about. I feel like calculus, especially because I'm spiritual and I
mm.
tell people all the time, oh, my degree is very spiritual. And they're just like, it's computers. And I'm like, electricity is so spiritual. Like, we don't even know what an electron looks like. We don't even know how they like behave. Like, it's such an
Mm.
abstract thing. It's so abstract. And you just don't know anything about electricity. We don't know how it works. We just know that you can like give it memory. Isn't that so cool?
Yes, bro. And like dog, like it's really interesting. Like, okay, this also I don't think I ever like went down. Like I never made it like, oh, this is the side door. But basically, like, to that point of like faith, and then specifically, I guess I wanted to talk about like kids, like what you just mentioned is like the intersection of faith and science.
Mhm.
Because I used to see them, and like I guess I'll just like start by like enumerating my experience with it. Like I used to see them as being like diametrically opposed, which also kind of like characterized my attitude towards, I guess, like thinking of a higher power in general. Because like I was just like, I think something like, oh yeah, mostly like nihilistic and cynical in terms of my worldview, and so like, bro, it's all just numbers. This universe is like cold and doesn't care, and so it's like you can find some like mathematical way to put it, but then let's like that's diametrically opposed to like, oh, something created it or put intentionality behind it. And then I
Mhm.
feel as though now, especially like the farther that I've gotten into those specific fields, is I'm like, oh yeah, wait, no, I lied. Because like I think you mentioned like, oh yeah, giving electricity memory, or like specifically like I think the field that really like made me like, oh, I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. It's like quantum mechanics to a degree of like, okay, good. Try to explain the quantum entanglement. Go. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah,
spooky, spooky action at a distance, bro. Awesome Einstein.
yeah. Or like stuff like obviously like the Heisenberg uncertainty. Like we actually don't know what we're on about.
Just like I think so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
That's what.
So I guess because you mentioned like spiritual, like I guess do you fall like would you say you describe yourself as falling into any like major religious denomination or like way of thinking?
So my family's Muslim, so like I still have like the cultural values of like a Muslim. Like if I have someone over, I'll always like offer them food and stuff. I know that's like in other cultures too, but specifically like Islam, like that's a major thing. It's like a sunnah to not. You can't like if someone's like over, you have to like offer them food and like
Mm-hmm.
make sure they're not hungry and stuff. And like other customs like that, like those are just stuff I feel like religion kind of shapes the type of person you are and like the personality you have a lot of the time. But when I had that break between religion and then branching off into spirituality, there was like a period of just nothingness where I was like, when I like kind of came to like grips with like, oh, I don't believe in this religion, I was like, well, then that means nothing matters. And
Just say, well, throw it
well,
all away.
nothing matters. And I was like to myself, no, Mistura, no. It actually doesn't matter. And then from there, I kind of like developed. I, I'd say like a more like profound understanding and affinity with my degree, especially because I just like to like, especially with science specifically. So like even the way like I view what the Big Bang is,
Mm.
because we were like expanding from a small point. I feel like humans observing and like growing and like giving birth and like having kids and people dying, even though people are dying, more people are being born at the same time. It's like you're all just expanding in your way. You're like learning more, and it's just the self-reflective part of it. And then it kind of makes me understand what I'm doing a bit more, and it kind of gives a bit more of a purpose rather than me just being like, nothing matters. This isn't what I'm gonna believe in. But I still believe that like other religions, it's just there's different ways to achieve heaven, I think.
Mm.
And it just depends on what you believe in, the way you see it. But I feel like with spirituality, it's like the way I see it, at least, because spirituality is that kind of vague thing for different people. I think of it as you can have experiences which are heaven, you can have experiences which are hell, and you can achieve that through what you do and like through mindfulness.
Mm.
Yeah, that's how I think of it.
That's so cool. Huh. Yeah, I think I wouldn't even. Yeah, okay. This is a very like it's still very tangled in my head in terms of like how I would describe myself.
Mhm.
But I think it aligns a bit with what you just described. And I think another thing, I guess, like zooming out another level on top of that, because you had mentioned like how the different religions and like how there's different ways of achieving heaven. And I
Mhm.
think one of the core tenets of like the way I think about any of those is that like from what I've gathered and like the yeah, I would say pretty shallow. Like I don't think I've like I'm definitely not a super duper theologian, but I've tried to educate myself to at least some degree on the various like core principles of these different faiths. Because like I don't know, I grew up Christian or like my mother is very devout, but then I had like again like very cynical. This partially due to like my relationship with my parents, and like so very cynical, kind of like they like this. I don't really like how they've been raising me, so therefore I don't like this. And so it's
Mhm.
very defined by negation, and then it's like okay, go actually do research, like what are these different things saying, and like before you just throw out the baby with the bathwater, like what values can these provide. And the main, I guess, takeaway that I got from those is that the majority of the religions or like belief systems in like in general, it feels like the same core message but in different fonts.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, that's definitely what I think about it. Obviously, there's some aspects where it's like some of it. I feel like when you look at the core aspect, I feel like the thing that was blinding me through a lot of religion when I was like, oh, nothing matters, was that I was focusing on what the people were doing,
Yeah.
and you can't. One thing I've learnt, right, over the past couple of years is that not a lot of people think. Like critical thinking isn't as common as you think it is. No, it's it's true. Like people don't actually think. Like they just they just follow with rules. They're
Yeah.
just like, I need to do this. This is what I need to do to get here done. Like I'm not gonna think. And a lot of people don't have that internal dialogue that questions them. Oh, what I'm doing right? Do I believe in what I'm doing? It's just like, no, I've been told this, so therefore I'm gonna do this.
Mm.
And I feel like it's quite toxic, especially for a person that's like looking back at religion. But religion is not inherently bad. I
Yeah.
feel like it's just people are quite absurd by nature, and you just can't take everything people do for face value, because some people, if you ask them if an angel came to you in your sleep and told you to kill your child, would you do it? And they'd say yes with no hesitation. And that's scary. But you can't blame that on religion. You have to like think about how they're being told about this, how this information is being fed to them. Because a lot of people, they don't have the privilege of free thought.
Yeah. Or it's like, yeah, if I like deviate and like start critically assessing like whether or not I fully believe in this, I get ostracized from the group, and then that's like my survival on the line.
Mhm.
Mm. And to that point of like you put it in a very kind way of like calling like the adjective absurd. I feel like is very very nice, but that same sort of like yeah, same. I feel like I come to a pretty similar like point of like okay, give them grace or like be basically like separating the practitioners from the principles or like doctrine itself. Because specifically, like again, like in that more atheist, like man, shut up, religion's stupid. Everybody who believes it's a sheep, etc., etc. Like I feel like I've definitely leaned more towards like no, there's definitely people who there are like, and I feel like the most like I have the most respect for people who have critically thought about it and then given that critical thought, decided to come back to religion despite that fact. I'm like, okay, you made a choice here. And it's like, I listen to those people with more intent than just like, I just do this. Or like, this is just what I was fed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I feel like when someone's come to you with an argument and they're just like, oh, but I was just told this, but that's quite
The Bible says
illogical.
so. The Bible says so. I'm like, all right, bro.
Okay.
And like specifically, like my I guess core gripes or like the quickest I guess example that I usually go to with this is like, bro, like yeah, a core belief of mine is that I don't feel like a deity wrote any of the spiritual texts. And I feel like there's like a part of my biggest like distrust or distaste with like organized religion in general is because I feel like the tampering of like humans is too prevalent within it. And it's just like, do you really expect me to believe that none of like the I don't know there's like okay I'm going down a bunch of different paths, but specifically with Christianity, there
Mm-hmm.
was the Protestant Reformation in 1517 because like the Catholic Church was like just known to be like, oh yeah, we sell tickets to heaven. We like that fire and brimstone. Like,
Yeah.
So and then like the Protestant Reformation came about because Martin Luther went through and like wrote his 95 theses of like this is why you guys are on fuck shit and that's why I don't mess with the Catholic Church. And I was like, so you want me to believe that okay, that was the only time though. That's the only time they ever put some
Ever
extra.
did that?
I'm like,
Yeah. I just find it very difficult to believe. Like I'm not buying it.
yeah, like, and it's like what I think the most not most recent, but like the piece that I added to the system that has allowed me to like absorb more of those like doctrines without like basically like what has allowed me to quiet that voice of like no this is bullshit if just be it's I got this I think from like Jordan Peterson or whatever. It was like summer after high school. I was like going through like his like lecture series and like a lecture series on the Bible in particular because it was like bridging the gap between like psychology, which is like okay, I cared about like yeah, I would listen to science but not religious faith in particular. And then the series that he had was kind of way to like mend or like bridge the gap between them. And the primary like argument or rebuttal against that original way of thinking of like because I guess like if I were to enumerate the arguments like since this is tampered with by man, it's completely subjective and therefore goofy. And then like it's like I can kind of ignore it because of the fact that like everybody's saying different things. That means nobody knows what they're talking about. Therefore, this is BS. I can just do whatever I want, and that is somewhat I guess valid still. But the rebuttal to that is like okay, cool. It may or may not have been human like tampered with, but for it to have survived that long, like the like for this oral tradition to like have been passed down for 2,000 plus years, even if it's like getting a game of telephone, the very core principles that are always there of like love thy neighbor, of like don't be particularly lustful or whatever it is, or like be particularly hateful, etc., etc. Like those, like even because like another way I found to, like bring it into the fold of what I was already more comfortable with is to think of it as like evolution of ideas of like
Mm-hmm.
was survival of the fittest. So even if they are on BS, the fact that it even got to you means that there had to be some sort of value to that like doctrine.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like when you just go on the like tangent of just yeah, because it was written, because it's tampered, therefore it can't like that's quite like a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And like you can just there's really like I feel like a lot of these core values kind of align with just like just normal morals. Because after
Mhm.
I left religion, I was like, okay, I need to have morals. So like I put like I made a list of like morals I had. Then I was like, let me just compare it to like other religion morals, and it was essentially just the same thing. It
Mhm.
was really just the same thing. So it doesn't even matter if it's a game of Chinese whispers. Like there's a certain amount of like there's an agreed consensus, anyways. So that doesn't necessarily make it invalid. It's just not necessarily the exact thing.
Yeah. And I think like as like to that same point of like the same message, different fonts thing, I think the most useful like resolution I've had to that is like, okay, like basically I forgot, like one of my friends described it as like relationship over religion. And so like there are those core messages that will make them self manifest, like that is low key somewhat self evident, if you want to say. And it's like I feel like the connection to that, like whatever that you want to call it, like if you distill like literally, yeah, the conception I have of it now is like, and like another way that I've found to like be able to like bring it into the fold is that God term, or like Allah or Yahweh, whatever you want to call it, is just a label that different cultures, whatever, like give to the same sort of axiom or entity, and like at their best, because obviously like they're humans and they're fallible, and so they have import their weird like stone the gays, or like do weird like,
Yeah.
all right, y'all boys balling, like, all right, I don't think the all loving God said that, but okay. But it's like at their core, before they get tampered with, they're all oriented towards like this is just the word that we're gonna give to the most absolute good, most absolute loving thing, and like axiomatically or like definitionally, I'm getting cooked by that word bad. Definitionally, that's what God is supposed to be. And then you have the imperfect followers and prophets of said like message. And that's how you get. Hmm. Yeah. So I guess like the question I think already asked this, and slash you already slightly answered, and that you said you grew up Muslim, or I guess out of the common ones, like do you find, yeah, okay, I'm gonna just say the question, and then there's a good chance you're probably like, okay, I'm gonna hear an answer that I already heard. But it's like, which ones of those do you feel like you align the most closely with?
Um, Out of like the religions.
Yeah, like let's just go with like I guess Abraham, because like okay, I'm thinking, mm, yeah. So I'm gonna give I guess my answer, and then maybe that makes it a bit more apparent what I'm trying to get at.
Mm.
But so I'm thinking like I particularly am drawn to the idea or like core principle of Jesus, since it seems like at its best, like without the Westboro Baptist Church or whatever weird stuff that people be on, the core message of there is love, especially in comparison to like the Old Testament. Like what the New Testament was is basically like from like what I've been hearing, and like I've tried to educate myself by speaking to people who are a bit more educated on the subject, like people like some of my friends who are more devout, and like basically what I got from that is that the core idea of the New Testament is that the Old Testament was like a law book, or like this is like a series of dictums. Here's the Ten Commandments. This is what you have to do, or else fire and brimstone, you go to hell. And then the coming of Jesus or whatever is supposed to be the benevolence of that God, and like the self, like that. Yeah, the core elements that I attribute to the best of Christianity is love and self-sacrifice, because that's like what the story of Jesus is supposed to represent. And so I feel like if there ever was a religion that I would like find myself leaning back into, it'd probably be Christianity. But then again, I should yeah, because I grew up with it. Duh.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I feel the same way about Islam. But
Hmm.
like I do just kind of I think right now it's more so about, I think, Taoism or something. Taoism, Buddhism is the one I look into the most. And especially like, I mean, in Islam it's kind of the same. They have like chakras in Islam too, but it's called a different thing.
Mhm.
It's just, in my idea, everything is just energies. Like everything is just like, superimposing each other. Everything's just like a constructive, destructive interference, and that's like what creates our reality. And I think that God is just like the algebraic sum of all of that.
Okay, math major. For real. Okay. Hmm. This is a slight tangent,
Okay.
and again, you've like I don't even. This is not a slight, more than a slight tangent, but basically, because you mentioned like looking into PhD, I guess
Mhm.
like, basically my question overall is like long term objectives slash like where would you like to see yourself in I guess like 10 to 15 years.
Um, in 10 years, how old would I be? 30. What would I be doing at 30? Um, I want to have my degree. um, I would have, I would like preferably have some experience with like computer engineering, some stuff, but in like the next, like from then, like 15 to 20 years onwards, I just want to like be a lecturer.
Lecture. Okay. Hmm.
Yeah.
I guess what had inspired that like yeah that motivation.
I just like knowledge and like the deliverance of it the most. Yeah. Like I'd say the one thing that used to like always upset me is like when knowledge is lost. I feel like that's such a like a massive loss to humanity.
Mm.
Um so my Roman Empire is literally, you know, the libraries of Alexandria
Xandria.
burning.
Yes, bro. And then how they burnt. It's so sad.
It's actually the like I think about it, it actually just upsets me. Because can you imagine the amount of stuff we could know with that? And that's why I love like forms of like physical media. That's what really got me into like hardware engineering and stuff because like the death of obviously you've got the birth of the video and like the subsequential death of the radio. And like I feel like as humans, we kind of go through them. That was a long way to say video killed the radio star. But I feel like as humans, we go through like a subsequential like with the advancements and the like advancements of technology, we kind of lose a part of us. That's why I like writing down things. I don't like putting things on my journal. Like I don't like having a journal on my phone. It's just not the same. Like
For real.
it's something different, and there's something different about the energy you have when you just sit down, you get a piece of paper and a pen and you write stuff down.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's so real. Oh, okay, okay. If you could go to like a period of history, like if you because you mentioned like Roman Empire or like and like the libraries of Alexandria, like if you could visit, I guess us yeah, a historical period, which would it be and why?
Oh, um, oh, yeah. I would love to see how they built the pyramids.
Real. That's not
Yeah,
crazy.
because what they said that like inside of it, something about the speed of light travels like 10 times faster, or like no sound travels like I don't remember what it was, but I was just
Mhm.
I feel like the pyramids are just humans couldn't have done that.
Mm.
There's no way. Like you're telling me all of this, like the slaves in Egypt were able to build that in how many years? Like if even if we had machines, I saw that it would take us like 1,000 years. Yeah.
Sheesh.
So like whatever the like ancient Egyptians like had going on, and like their maths were like amazing, and I can only imagine like how much of that we've lost, which is quite upsetting.
No bull. Hmm.
Yeah, but what about you? Is there like a specific time?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like I look at the question and I don't have a preloaded answer. And so like right now I'm filtering through and then I'm like a part of it is like there's a difference between like wanting to see, but then like as a black person, time travel is probably not very accessible. So like I would want to
Yeah.
be y'all probably don't take very kindly to me over there, but I'm glazing kind of bad. But
Mm.
I would Roman Empire during the reign of Marcus Aurelius,
Mm.
specifically just so I could like just so I'd be like, the hell he got going on? Because I don't know.
Literally
I
just
feel,
like the gameplay.
yeah, it's like and I don't know. I get that's like me, like that's like the stoic dude, and like the fact that I read Meditations, like, and I'm glazing. I'm like, oh yeah, great man, history, I guess. But
Mm.
I feel like it would be particularly interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think if there's any other times because there's definitely another time I'm thinking of, but like I just would also like to see like how nice Earth was.
Mm.
Everywhere's just
How
dirty. Yeah. Like before the demographic transitions and the industrial era, just forest.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. Like another side tangent, but I'm just thinking of like there's kids who are like born today or whatever it is that just like the world that you spawned into is just so very foreign to say like our parents and like the world that they inherited. And it's like, dang, there's going to be a time where it's like, yeah, there's no more rainforest, Loughborough. I'm sorry. We killed
Yeah, that's so
it.
crazy. Yeah. Oh, and with that, yeah, I was gonna ask you a question.
Mm.
As a like a CS, like a part CS major, but just like I'm assuming that you like kind of like you're interested in like computers and stuff exactly like that. Like, what do you think about the current conflict in like Congo specifically with resources, and what do you think about the landscape of computer science and computer engineering, and how do you think that's going to change um, with this day and era? Because I feel like in this era specifically, because of social media, everybody now kind of has like there's not really an idea of like a state identity, is more so like of an online identity. So
Hmm.
if you like res, what's the word? Agree with a certain amount of views, you'll have like a certain way of thinking. And for me, as like a computer engineer, well, I've been thinking about the Congo thing. I'm like, wow, so like maybe in a couple of years in my degree, hopefully they'll change it and be like, oh, we don't need like silicon, we don't need this, but we have this way of like of making a CPU, for example. So what do you think that's gonna be like? Or if you think it's gonna change at all?
Huh. Yeah, yeah, it's keeping a whole bean. I don't think I'm particularly educated on this topic enough to like give a good prediction, but I don't know. The first thing I thought of was like it's probably going to be similar to like fossil fuels and like our transition toward renewable energy, where it's like the
Mhm.
technology does exist. However, like my again, this is me being slightly cynical, but I'm like, there's a lot of people who make money off of the system as it's currently built, and so it's like human motivation. I think that I don't know if I just had to give a overall prediction of what is probably likely to happen is like there might be a groundbreaking technology that comes through. It's like, oh yeah, we can definitely replace like yeah, probably quantum computing in particular. So it's like, okay, cool. We have a way that is like empirically and unequivocally better, but I feel like there's going to be a lag or like a decent time of delay due to like the structure of like capitalism and people like, nah, I'm trying to make my bread off of this though. And it's like, dang.
Exactly, exactly. But I feel like recently there's kind of like, do you know like how everyone's now interested in class consciousness because of
Mm,
the recent um the recent killing? I feel like more people are going to be more interested in things like that. I don't know. I don't know. Me and my friends were talking about this earlier, and I was like, I'm not really sure about a revolution, but maybe definitely change. Like I feel like with people and being able to have your news so accessible, it really does radicalize people. People
mm.
really do end up like changing. Like, do you know about the Arab Spring protests?
No, it's that.
So back in the 2010s, I think this Tunisian seller, he was I don't remember what happened, but essentially these police officers came up to him and they were like, oh yeah, you can't be selling your stuff here. And like he was making money to support his family, and they were trying to get him to like bribe like them, but like he's a broke salesman, like he doesn't have money. So what he does is he just sets himself on fire, and then the video goes across like Twitter and Facebook, and essentially it caused all of these protests in the Arab Peninsula, and it caused this like a lot of regimes to fall, and a lot of um it introduced like a lot of more democracy in that peninsula. And if it wasn't for social media, a lot of people wouldn't have known about it, but it was specifically because of that. Well, not only because of that, but it was a very massive factor. And I feel like that's kind of what we're seeing right now with things like, I mean, I heard TikTok is closing down. Is that true?
I don't. Okay, I've heard so many conflicting accounts on this. I think so. Maybe I have. Yeah, I'm nowhere near educated enough. I have no idea.
Okay.
But I've heard talks like, oh yeah, it's banned, it's cooked this time. I'm like, okay. I've heard, but like I've heard that same sort of like. I swear we had this conversation as like a society last year of like, okay, TikTok's getting cooked. Oh my god, I could have sworn like when Trump got elected, they're like, oh yeah, Trump's gonna ban TikTok. All right, cool. And then like
Yeah.
it just
Never
has
happened.
yeah. Just, so I'm
Yeah.
like, my initial reaction is like, yo, I think you guys are bluffing, but I'm like, I don't know. This could be the time where you're for real this time.
I mean, like, you'll find out when it's gone, or if
Just
it's
out of-
gone. And, like, people just have to deal with it then. But yeah.
No, also like to that similar point of like just like how the political sphere has changed as a result of technology. No, yeah, I guess the point I wanted to bring up is not necessarily political, probably more social, but just like us as a generation, our kids are going to be able to see like literally everything I did. Like, because my like I had like yeah, like the same thing. Like, oh yeah, you're being born into a world that is fundamentally different than your parents. Specifically for like our generation, like people who are currently 20 or whatever. Like,
Mhm.
I think we're like the first generation, or like maybe like I don't know, like my older brothers and stuff like that. But like they like okay, they had their first smartphone when they were like in high school or whatever. But for us, it was like middle school or whatever. And so it's basically like there's kids like I know it was like okay, you have TikToks and Musicallys of you at like 13 years old, and
Yeah.
that's just going to be in the like there's going to be people doing history on us like in say 100 200 years, and they're going to have access to much more like direct and like extensive documentation of like oh yeah, not only did okay this is like for example I'm thinking like a lot of history that we have now is like oh yeah, there's a letter written from like I don't know Thomas Jefferson to someone else or whatever from like 1966, and it's just like you get this one little sliver of what they were thinking like or like how they might have delivered that versus this right here. This is going to be an artifact of like yeah, this is a conversation we had when we were 20 years old or whatever, but like
Mhm.
you get a very deep insight of exactly the way that I'm thinking and like how it is that I'm like articulating myself, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like mixed bag is like, it's gonna be really weird when there's a whole bunch of like TikTok and Instagram accounts of dead people. And
Exactly. Yeah. That kind of haunts me actually, just to think about like there's gonna be just seas of dead accounts, just people. It's like an online graveyard.
yeah, bro. And it's
Mm.
gonna like you're gonna be like, oh yeah, this was his like you're gonna that's gonna be like a whole of like, yeah, you can see this kid's life like literally from 12 years old through like every different like chapter because he's like posting Instagram updates. And so it's like, okay, all the way to the when little Timmy died. That's like, damn.
Yeah. Damn.
I
Yeah.
took that to a little bit of a dark place. My bad.
No, it's fine.
Oh, shit, what time is it? Oh. Okay. I think first and foremost, thank you so much. This was great. But I was gonna say, like, as a wrap up, do you have any like whether it's scripture or a quote or whatever, like basically like words and or ideals that you come back to often?
Oh yeah, yeah. Um so I think I don't the thing I used to like pray kind of quotation marks is I always ask for the wisdom. No, not wisdom. Wait, give me a second. It's on here somewhere.
No, you're good.
Um, uh, yeah. I ask God for the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Yeah, that's like one of my favorite things to like go back to all the time.
Hmm.
They can always just be boiled down to things that you can accept and things that you can change. And then the best thing overall is like the wisdom to know the difference between all of that.
Real. That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and overall, bro, I'm so like happy and thankful for the fact that you reached out. Cause this was like great as hell. I really like this. No
Thank
bullshit.
you.
And I don't know. I definitely like would love to like do this again sometime, like as like a checkup or whatever. Like, oh yeah, how's the middle of your semester going? How's mine going? That'd be really
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'll just need to remember to do that because like I've got ADHD. I'll forget. Yeah, I would generally forget.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
problem. But yeah, with that, I think I'm gonna call it here.
Mhm.
But it
It
was
was
a pleasure.
lovely meeting you.
Yeah, definitely. Likewise. Bye bye. Have a wonderful rest of
Bye.
your day.
Wait, what's the time like for you? It's what?
It is currently 2:11 p.m. I have.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
What happened?
Oh, look, it's 7 o'clock. I was like, raw. That's a massive difference. Yeah.
But yeah, I have a tutoring session at 2:30, so I need to make sure I'm like ready for that.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Okay, I'll see you.
See
Good
you.
luck with your tutoring session. It was lovely talking to you.
Lovely talking to you as well. Bye bye.
Bye.